we're all dealing with human beings. And there's many reasons why people can show up in social media a certain way and we don't know the full story. Don't say something because you want to say something. Say something because you have something to say. I feel that Singaporeans in general really suck at career visibility. A lot of us believe that our work should speak for itself. And if you are just a warm body, then you are replaceable. You can't go wrong if you're doing your best and it's real. If you are doing your best and you are being authentic, nobody can hold that against you to some extent.
So you know what they say, fake it till you make it. But what happens when you fake an interaction so hard that it goes viral on a professional networking social media platform? Yes, I'm talking about the recent episode of a LinkedIn user who claimed she met former DBS CEO Piyush Gupta. Turns out it wasn't him. The post took off and sparked commentaries, reflections, and podcast episodes like this one about what LinkedIn is for and what it has become. Is it now a community for humble bragging, toxic positivity, or exaggerating professional interactions in the quest to stand out from our peers? Now, to help me dive into the conversation about celebrating professional milestones and branding ourselves, I have Crystal Lim-Lange. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Natasha. It's really great to be here.
Well, let me tell our audience a little bit about you. So you're a two-time LinkedIn top voice. You pegged yourself as Singapore's work bestie, and you're an expert in leadership and personal growth. I feel like I'm introducing you into a ring with all this. She's ready to go.
Ding, ding, ding.
I'm up against you. I got nothing else. Do I like using LinkedIn?
You're Singapore's SPH bestie. What is your tagline?
What is my tagline? I just talk about things that people are talking about, which is why this episode happened.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about the whole saga. Firstly, what did you make of it when you first read about it?
Okay, before I say anything about the specifics of this, I want to make a very general point, which is that we are all dealing with human beings. And there's many reasons why people can show up in social media a certain way and we don't know the full story. So I'm by no means a mental health expert, but I'm married to one. I'm married to a clinical psychologist. And, I would say maybe 1/3 of people are actually struggling with some sort of mental health condition, that makes them come across as, having low levels of self-awareness or maybe appearing to come across as pathological liars or this and that. Of course, I'm not expert. I'm not diagnosing this lady, but I think it's also worthwhile bearing in mind before we get into the nitty-gritty to be kind because we don't know what on earth this person is going through. So having said that, yes, when this whole incident came to light, it was just K-drama. There were twists, there were turns.
Every other day it was because first she said it was not known that there was a social media manager behind it. It was
absolutely.
Blackmailing her.
Yes.
So it was every few hours, there was a thing happening, right?
Yes. So I think that the thing there was that, I remember one comment on social media is really, you want to make this the hill that you want to die on? You know what I mean? She chose to kind of almost double down on this thing as it was unfolding. And I mean, early on in the process, if it was a simple mistake, like when Piyush came out and said oh, that's not me. At that point of time, if you come out and say, oops, I'm so sorry, that would have kind of almost headed off all of this. But even from the very get-go, she doubled down. When Piyush said that, she was like, oh, but it looks like you, haha. And didn't I see you around? And I paraphrase, right? Now, here I want to kind of have a slight digression about casual racism. I actually found it borderline racist and problematic. A lot of the comments and her comment that you look the same as the other person. Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate in a multicultural society for anybody to be commenting on another race person and then saying that you look similar to the person from that race.
Right, yeah.
It's happened to me a lot before when I lived overseas and white people were forever coming up to me oh, but you look so similar to Lucy Liu or whoever.
No
and
way.
It's no, it's just because I'm Chinese and you don't actually, your eye doesn't really distinguish between one Chinese person and another. And I think in this case also there was that specter of casual racism where, I did see certain almost media outlets or social media, very famous social media accounts that posted, and actually the caption was something like, actually looks the same or looks similar, things like that. And so I found that piece problematic as well. I don't know. Did you feel that?
No, I understand about being compared to someone when you're overseas or when you're a minority somewhere and then people are like, but you look like,
Yes.
Yeah. So when you were sharing that example, I was like, is it because their only point of reference is like Lucy Liu, like they've never met other people?
I mean, like some people were like, even the guy himself, the real person who Bali, who actually was later interviewed. Remember, they found this guy. He actually
a teacher, right?
The teacher who was living in Bali, and he came out to say, he's like, I feel this is racist. I don't feel like do all bald Indian men look with spectacles look the same to you, sort of thing. So I think it's worthwhile just like putting in a marker there. That's, at least for me, one of the things that stood out from the whole incident, because there were a lot of people who were oblivious in the comments saying, actually looks like what? Or she doesn't look like. And I just felt that as a society that wants to be mature and evolve into civic discourse, we also need to be a little bit more conscious and sensitive about our speech. Yeah. But then, going into how this whole thing escalated, it seemed a little bit that a lot of people were looking at it as a pretty desperate attempt to get attention. And also the fact that she was kind of linking this kind of like clickbaity thing along with her company, her expedition or whatever, that seemed to be another sort of problematic piece. Which is like, okay, you have an encounter with somebody and then you try to kind of make it out as if that person somehow in a very tenuous way is saying that your business is so great or you are so great because your business is so great and therefore leads to ka-ching, call to action, sign up for my whatever business. So I felt, and that part really backfired because I believe was it SG Enable who came out and said that, okay, we are not associated. Yeah.
Everyone suddenly went like, okay, I don't want to be involved in this conversation that I did not choose to be a part of. You know what I mean? Yeah, because everybody got arrowed in that between Piyush Gupta, the teacher, and then the SG Enable. Everybody was like, whoa, what happened here?
Yeah, so this is an instance where somebody is trying to create connections between them and certain brands, like associate themselves with Piyush, with Goh Chok Tong, with SG Enable, trying to create the sense of connections in order to elevate their own brand. Yeah, and it kind of backfired. And I think that, that sort of approach looks very transactional and can turn a lot of people off. In LinkedIn, where it looks as if you are trying to capitalize on some association. And I get it all the time too, actually, on LinkedIn. People tag me all the time. They were like, they write a post and then they tag me and they're like, oh, actually, Crystal, I've been following her and she said this. And then there's like, buy my product. And I'm like, remove tag.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So you reach out to them to say, please don't tag me in this.
I actually don't have the time.
Oh,
I either just remove the tag or just, I mean, yeah.
This whole thing, highlighted in a way that, are we like pursuing LinkedIn fame and likes? And is it kind of like getting out of hand?
Yes and no. And yeah, this is a really complex one. On one level, we need career visibility, okay? Which is in itself an entire podcast, right? I feel like Singaporeans in general really suck at career visibility. A lot of us believe that our work should speak for itself. You know what I mean?
That's me. I'm like, but I, show up and I do all these things.
Yeah.
I should get promoted, I guess.
Exactly. But life doesn't work that way. A lot of times, in fact, in today's world, it's no longer sufficient to do the work. I'm not saying that you should only talk about your work, but you need to do the work and you need to be able to articulate the value that you've created. You need to tell the story of your work. So it's an additional job scope that a lot of people actually don't fulfill very well. And I always say that when you actually make the effort to tell the story, you're doing a service. Doing a service to your stakeholders as well, because a lot of times the people who are in charge of evaluating you, they've got like dozens of people to evaluate. They don't have the time to follow you like Sherlock Holmes and say, oh, what she did, oh, she did that, la, la, la. If you actually take the time to actually distill it into, these were the milestones, this is the value I created, this is the revenue, this is the cost savings I've generated, right? Then it makes it easy for people to actually understand the narrative of who you are. So that having said that, I do believe there is a place and a time for career visibility and being able to tell the story in a skillful and articulate way, authentic way of what you've created. in a way that, is not like shameless bragging, but it's about owning it. Yeah. Okay. Having said that, then there's the another dimension, which is where do we draw the line, and when does it become very self-serving humble brag? And I feel like that is a problem with LinkedIn at the moment. A lot of people have said to me that, LinkedIn has jumped the shark. As in, it's already peaked. And now we're in like post-peak LinkedIn, where it's full of AI bots. It's full of people using ChatGPT to write their posts. So they all look the same with all the M dashes and stuff like that, right? There's lots of people using engagement pods. And I think engagement pods and fake traction are a huge thing.
Okay, so from my perspective, as someone who also, uses the platform, because people tell you need to do it and then you need the career visibility. I need to, get more visibility for this podcast. It's tiring because you have to think of like, how do I stand out against my competition? And then how do I, say what I want to say in a different way every time kind of thing. It is tiring, I feel.
I feel that LinkedIn is more tiring than other platforms. For me, I do Instagram every day and I post like 10 to 30 stories, pieces of content every day on Instagram. That's a lot, but it never feels tiring.
I was going to say, it doesn't feel like work, right? Because it's kind of like a fun thing.
And also with Instagram, there's a sense of community that's more authentic, that people are actually having these like casual conversations and no one's pushing their stuff. No one's selling you stuff, they're not like pushing it tends to be less worky. Whereas on LinkedIn, it's a different ball game because it's very performative. It's like, you know what I mean? Everyone feels...
That's the word, performative.
It's more performative than the other, So for instance, I post all the time, me in Instagram, no makeup, in a bathrobe, doing my makeup or something, talking about stuff, random stuff, right? And it doesn't take any effort from me. But like, I would never post that on LinkedIn. Because on LinkedIn, you're expected to kind of
be
like
professional,
be on show. And I think that's where the effort comes to, is this suitable for work? Which edited, curated version of myself and my showing? And like, will my bosses find it okay? Or that sort of thing.
So how does this incident with the lady misidentifying someone, what does it highlight about the pressures or temptations people face to appear more successful, more connected than they actually are? And by extension, what does it say about us that we need to think of how to elevate, in a way, our interactions and our career moves and
stuff? This is a very complex one because,
My bad, I hit you.
It's a very complex one because I certainly do have some empathy with this lady and why she's doing it. Let me give you an example, because certain things like the algorithm, it prioritizes certain things. So it's kind of like, I hate the game, but I got to play the game. For example, the LinkedIn algo loves faces, and it loves kind of like more close-up or portrait crop faces sort of thing. So if I post a post without my face, then it will do nowhere as well as if I post a post of my face. So therefore, we know that if you want to kind of like get seen, like you need to do certain things and in a way play the game. But it then becomes, how do you play the game without selling out completely? So everyone has to find for themselves the balance of authenticity and strategy.
Is it a very fine line though, where you can like cross over into being inauthentic?
Yes, I feel like it's very tricky. And even for myself, I will not say that I'm 100%, happy with how I've done it. And I'm just all the time trying to figure it out. But for me, my North Star is that I say to myself, okay, is it educational? Is it entertaining? Or is it inspirational? These are the three.
So if you hit one of the three, then you're posting.
I need at least one of the three.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally I hit all three, but sometimes it's 2 out of 3 is good enough. But if you don't hit any of the three, then it's self-serving. So I have a metric, it's like a test. It's like, okay, if I put this out, will it actually serve someone else who's reading this? Or is it purely self-serving, right? And I don't want to be a purely self-serving person. I think one of the problems is that on LinkedIn now, a format that has gone really viral because of the algorithm, it's kind of vomit inducing to me. I'm like, every time I see this format, I'm like, Okay, so like there's this like trend, like various versions of this trend, which is like you post something about like photograph of yourself, and it's like, oh, this little girl used to be me. Look how far I've come, and like, oh, when this person was young, she didn't know this, and look at me now. It's any sort of version. It could be like you holding up your whatever, something your teacher said to you, like some bad feedback, and then like, this teacher didn't know I'm like very successful now, or like, oh, to the client, or like kind of like to the client who told me that I would never succeed, to the boss that whatever, and look at me now. But the purpose of that a lot of times is the look at me now. Aren't I great? I have made it in my particular way. And this is what I have done. I have now appeared on so many talk shows. I have won so many deals, and it's just like a kind of listicle of like what they've done. Now, a lot of people, 50% of their LinkedIn content is like this. It's just me. Look at me. I never thought, okay, I hope this inspires you, but it's really about them. For me, I try to kind of like it's not that I don't do it, but it's like 1 out of every 20 posts, or 1 out of every, I don't know, more than 20 posts is like that. I think I only did like the only one I can remember recent history that I did of that was something to do with like, okay, a lot of you believe that you can make $1 million being a public speaking coach. And it took me 14 years. And let me show you exactly how I did it and why it took 14 years. And I listed out in this year, this is how much money I made this year. And a lot of the first 7 years was like negative or zero. And I just felt like, okay, that is something that can inspire and something that is educational. So it kind of ticked and also was entertaining. So that one turned out to go absolutely viral and, had like, lots, hundreds of thousands of views and that sort of stuff. But other than that, I don't believe that anything you put out should be purely self-serving.
It's weird for me because I dislike doing that, the talking about yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm also one in the camp of like, my work should speak for itself,
Yes.
right? So, okay, maybe my career visibility, not that good. But
You're quite visible on camera all the time, so you're putting stuff out.
yeah, I was like, yes, I turn up at work, I should get paid. The thing about it is what is it about us that we feel like we're now in an age where we need to, uncut ourselves a little bit. And what is it like that we feel so comfortable? I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, but if we're on this platform and every day we're like, oh, look at me, then what does it say about us?
Okay, so I feel that it is a necessity because now we have ChatGPT, we have AI. Everything that doesn't require a personality that's not high touch and high trust will be done by AI. Okay, so like the future of jobs is that like all of the jobs in the world for us humans will be, will be the jobs that require high touch or high trust, or in a way working with high tech. But high touch and high trust comes from where? Like it comes from people knowing who you are. So for instance, there is a famous marketing sort of motto that says that people need to see you 7 times before they buy from you. They need to have 7 interactions. So for instance, if let's say I'm selling a training program, public speaking program, right? People won't just buy like the first time they see me. They'll be like, okay, the first time they see me, maybe they listen to my podcast. Second time they see me appear on this podcast. The third time they'll see my Instagram story. Then blah, 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 blah. That 7 times they see you, then only they'll be like, okay, this person, I built up a reservoir of trust and now I want to engage this person. Yeah, do you know what I mean? So a lot of times, like the social media serves as a kind of like, quite validly so, a trust engendering mechanism. Not just if you're an entrepreneur, but also if you are working for a corporate job. It's no longer very safe to work for a corporate job because like people are being retrenched all the time. If you do not have a personal brand, if nobody knows what you stand for, what value you've created, you're kind of like at the mercy of the company. And I always remember when I was in investment banking, my boss said to me, do you want to be the chair or do you want to be the human? I didn't understand that at first. I was working on a trading floor and he brought me down and he said like, look at all these traders and salespeople. And I was like, okay. I said, yeah. And he's like, what do you see? I'm like, okay, I see money. I see people. I see all of this. And he's like, no. He's like, to me, I see chairs. And he's like, every single one of this chair has a warm body on top of it. And the warm body's job is to make money. However, some of these chairs don't need a warm body. The chair itself makes the money. It's like whoever I put on that chair makes the money. And if you are just a warm body, then you are replaceable. But if you're somebody with a brand that the clients say, oh God, I want to deal with Crystal. If I walk out of here and I go join JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, my clients walk with me. Now then you're no longer the chair. And I feel right now in today's economy, a lot of us can no longer be the chair. ChatGPT can be the chair. Everybody can be replaceable or whatever. But if, without that sort of sense of personality, authenticity, values, and being able to articulate what you stand for, then you're very easily replaced. So I do believe there is a place for, and LinkedIn is, by the way, only one medium of career visibility. But career visibility is really three things. I'm actually making a course about this. That's why I'm dealing very deep into this. There's actually three things. The first thing is your presence, your executive presence. Your presence is what happens when you are in the room. So if you walk into a boardroom or a meeting room with me, pow, you have that presence. I can feel your energy. I look at you. I look at the way you speak. You make sense. You're clear, articulate. That is presence. Doesn't matter if it's a real room or a virtual meeting room. When you are in the room, that is presence. The second part of visibility is a brand. Now, this is when you're not in the room. So when you're not in the room, what do people say about you? Yeah. So the most important.
But that's something that you can't control. But it comes out from when before.
You can intentionally craft the branding of who you are. And I'll tell you in a moment, so that when you're not in the room, people will say about you a certain way, talk about you a certain way. And the most important meetings in your life that determine your career will happen when you're not in the room. Your promotion, your retrenchment, whatever, all these discussions are happening when you're not in the room. So the only thing that's in the room is your brand. Now, how do you craft brand? It's very important that you're consistent and your written work, the way you write emails, the way you respond on Slack, the way you deliver your deals, the way you show up and everything, that's all creating brand. Are you the kind of person that's, really direct? That comes through your brand. Everyone says, oh, Natasha, yeah, she's a no-nonsense, she's direct. But if you don't actually take the time to craft out your brand and find like 3 words, every single time people deal with me, they're going to think powerful, direct, whatever, funny, right? Then you'll end up with an accidental brand because everyone has a brand. But if you don't control your brand, other people will control it for you. They'll be like, oh, Natasha, she's the nice one, right? Oh, she's the smiley one. And then you end up with an accidental brand. So I'll give you an example, a very famous example, Carla Harris, who was MD at Morgan Stanley. She gave one of the most well-watched TED Talks about how she kind of learned female leadership tricks and empowerment. But she talked about in Morgan Stanley, she once got passed over for something, a promotion, and she overheard people saying, oh, Carla, she's not tough enough. And then she realized that in that environment, Morgan Stanley, toughness was like a buzzword, like a keyword. It was something that was valued in their culture. So she said, what I did next is for the next 60 days, I walked tough, I talked tough, I ate tough. And when people asked me for my opinion in meetings, I said, oh, I don't know. You know me, I'm a tough person. I'm going to be tough with that. Or when people came to her for feedback, she'd be like, I have to give you some tough love. I'm paraphrasing, And she kept on repeating this word tough because, she wanted to associate herself with that. I'm imagining if she posted on LinkedIn, she'd be like, I really admire tough leaders. This is like an example of toughness, So she's vibing. She's messaging tough, tough, tough. And she said it worked because after a month or so, she overheard some people, talking about her and say, oh, yeah, I don't know, because Carla's going to be real. Carla's so tough. You know what she's like? She's super tough.
And she changed that perception in just a month?
She controlled the narrative. That is how you control the brand. You first start off with understanding, like Inception. The movie Inception? Yeah. You got to understand what words you want to incept in people's minds, and then everything you do vibrates those words. So even if I'm trying to let's say I feel I'm not warm or empathetic enough, and I want to incept that word empathy, right? And that's something that I feel that is part of my leadership style. Maybe even on LinkedIn, I'm posting that, the most empathic leader I've ever met was Indra Nooyi or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm talking about commenting on other people's posts and saying oh, I really see that you have so much empathy. And I'm not even talking about myself, but just the fact that I keep on talking about this word is kind of association. It works that way.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But you have to be intentional.
Right. And the interesting thing to me is that you can change people's
Yes.
perception and you don't have to be like
Absolutely.
fit into that.
I mean, look at our PM Lawrence Wong. Look at how far he's come. You know, when he first came up, people were like, you know, don't know whether he is like, it was a bit too soft or like Liang Popo or like all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And now people respect him. He controlled the narrative, right? So you need to be very intentional. So I've talked about presence. I've talked about brand. And then the last part of career visibility is the piece that you and I would vibe with, which is value. In order to be visible in your career, you need to create value. You need to work damn hard and effectively on what you're doing. But you don't just need to create value. You need to be able to articulate the value of that you created. So for instance, let's say I'm working in back office and I'm not a revenue generator. So I can't say, oh, I generated $3 million of sales. But can I say, for instance, you know, I changed up our procurement system from 10 clicks to, it used to take 10 days and now it takes 3 days. I'm just making it up, right? In doing so, I freed up in the company. This is a move that impacted the entire region. And we did it together. But, you know, my part in it was spearheading this project. And in doing so, we actually saved 3,000 hours of our staff time. We actually made it faster, better, more consistent. Our system crashes 50% less through doing this, etc. Now you're articulating the value of what you've done. And a lot of people don't know how to do this.
I think so.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you kind of need to you kind of need to think it through, right? You can't just say I showed up for work and I did all these things.
No.
Because that technically is your job, right?
No, you need to talk about the result, which is I saved us $300,000. Okay, that's the result. You need to think about the impact. And because of that, we were able to ... work, free up more people, work with less, whatever this and that. And you need to talk about the scale. What scale was this? All the teams in Southeast Asia are currently using this method, whatever, or 2 teams are now currently trialing out the impact. And then you need to talk about your learning. During this process, I actually learned negotiation skills through working with, these 2 other departments. This is how I grew. This is how I learned from the process. So it's actually like a whole thing to be able to not just do the work, but to articulate the value of you and what you did. And I always say, start with the we and end with the I. What I mean is that, don't just say, I did this, right? It's a bit too much.
This goes back to the self-serving part.
Yeah, the self-serving part. Yeah. It's kind of like our team, we start with the we, our team did this. We all came together. We couldn't have done it without this ops team as well as this other team. And you end with the I. My role specifically within this was that my part was ... Yeah, so we have, in Asia, we tend to we too much. We, because we are a collective culture. In the Western world, they tend to I too much. Me, I did this, right? But I believe that it's actually a blend of both yin and yang. We need to start with the we and acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of giants and all of that. But we also need to end off with the I, which is like, so what did you do? Otherwise, you just tell me it's the team. I don't know what you did in it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It makes sense. So I want to know, is there one thing we or I can do to show up authentically on a platform like LinkedIn or whatever platform I'm using to talk about my work?
Yes.
How do I show up authentically?
This in itself is a whole thesis, but I think firstly, you need to understand what you have to say. I always tell my trainees, don't say something because you want to say something. Say something because you have something to say. So what is it that you have to say? First thing that you need to do is understand, what do you want to talk about? What is the value add? So you come up, if you're a newbie to LinkedIn, then you come up with certain pillars. Maybe I want to speak about, empowerment, mindsets, growth mindset. Or maybe I want to speak about giving people practical tips on networking, for example. Okay, so pick a few things that you want to really deliver, add value on, and that kind of resonate with your values. So then the second thing is that I would say also collect a story bank of authentic, not fake stories, but authentic stories. Yeah, so you don't have to always talk about yourself. You can actually share the learning that you've received. For example, like, a really useful piece of advice my mentor gave me was ... Yeah, or, the best thing I bought for under $100 last month was ... So it's like something that, it's like you're sharing. So the idea is that I'm not selling people on me. I'm just sharing what's worked for me. I think ideally you don't want to make people feel that I am convincing you that this thing is the best or that I'm the best. You, in fact, want to create this vibe that I am convincing myself that I love it. I'm convincing myself that this thing is the best. So I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to say, wow, this thing really worked for me. And I was so thrilled that it actually did. And that's why I'm sharing with you. And I'm not saying all of you should do this or buy this or read this or say this, but this is sharing. This is what worked for me. And if it works for you, so be it. And collect these stories. I would say that the third thing I would recommend is that always document, don't create. And what I mean by that is a Gary Vee thing that I stole, by the way. So Gary Vee always says document, don't create. So in your life, you have many interesting things going on, and you need to be comfortable actually being almost like a what do you call this? Like a documentarist. You know what I mean? So like if I don't know what to write on LinkedIn, I'm going to go back to my calendar, look at last week. What did I do last week? Did I have an interesting meeting? Oh my God, I met Natasha. You know what she said that really, like for instance, okay, let me just give you one, because last week I did a fireside chat with Jeremy and Arifin Shah. Okay, now if I wanted to, I can have stuck for something. I can just go back to that. I'm like, that was damn interesting. Okay, what can I pull out? Okay, the one thing Jeremy said that stood out to me was, I don't regret doubling down on my personality. I don't regret leading with my personality. That's an entire LinkedIn post. Or the one thing Arifin said that really stood out to me was, everything is democracy. Everything is about politics and civil discourse. So that alone in itself is a LinkedIn post. So every single thing that we do in our lives has the potential, if it's authentic, if it was meaningful to you, to be turned into some piece of content. And we need to get out of this performative aspect, which is, I'm going to look at the camera and then I'm going to perform. I'm going to tell you 3 tips, 5 ways, and whatever. That feels like, to a lot of people, too much.
A lot of selling.
A lot of selling.
It's just and then shoving.
Yeah, a lot of shoving down people's throats. I mean, if you're skilled, you can. But I think an easier thing is just look at your diary and always be recording, always be taking snapshots. So like, take a snapshot of some yourself. Okay, for instance, obviously, if there's certain clients that you're having a meeting with, maybe it may not be appropriate to publish them.
Let's have a selfie right now.
Yeah, let's have a selfie after the meeting, or maybe they don't want to be featured on LinkedIn, but you can always, as you are walking out of, I don't know, OCBC from an important client meeting, you are walking out in the lobby, you can take a photograph of yourself in the lobby and you can be like, wow, I just went for an amazing meeting. And one interesting question my client asked me was ... You don't have to name the client, you don't whatever, but this is real. And the thing with LinkedIn is that what works best is that kind of like cinema, is that the reality kind of component. Like if you upload like some stock image is the worst. Stock image is absolutely the worst. Or if you upload some generic photograph of yourself, like, whatever, a corporate headshot, it doesn't create that traction because people love stories and they love that reality TV aspect. So if I've actually learned the hard way, because I used to pay people, to do photo shoots every quarter, and then I would like post these like beautiful sort of like photographs, like very professional, and then those get super low traction because like people will stop the scroll if they feel like it's like
too polished.
They won't stop the scroll. If it looks like an ad, if it looks too polished,
they will just
scroll on.
off.
It looks like a Nike ad or it looks like a whatever ad. I feel like subconsciously, I feel you're trying to sell me something. But like if you see me and it's kind of semi-bad lighting in doing something that is a little bit incongruous, like maybe I'm holding a pen and I look like I'm talking to somebody off camera, I'll be like, wait, what's Crystal doing? I better stop the scroll and see. So like it's a little bit of that authentic kind of like fly on the wall.
More natural.
Yes. And also
in the moment kind of
absolutely.
thing, right? Yeah.
And also I think a lot of us forget about how interesting our day jobs are to other people.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I was just coaching Kelly, who is a Chinese DJ, and she came for my course recently. And she was like, okay, I'm going to try this documenting behind the scenes thing, because she didn't think her job was interesting. But I'm like, you're a DJ. It's so interesting, right? So in her Instagram stories, she actually showed people like, this is what the DJ console looks like, radio DJ. This is the clock on the wall. This is like, what we do. This is my script. This is like whatever. Obviously the things that she can show lah. But I thought it was so interesting. But it's that people often think that what they do behind the scenes is not interesting, but other people do. Yeah. So even if you work in a sausage factory, it's damn interesting. Hey,
I want to know how they're cased, know?
Yeah, they're casing something. Is it intestine or how does it, whatever. When I was an investment banker, we used to go to different industries all the time. I got the opportunity to go walk onto jack up, oil rigs. We got to see semi-submersibles. We got to see hotels being constructed and all of these things, construction, whatever. And like all of these behind the scenes were absolutely fascinating to me. I just love actually seeing how the metaphorical sausage is made. And I think that a lot of people can actually do that as well within reason. Obviously, don't show company secrets or anything.
That's how you get fired, and then you got no content.
Yeah, but you can talk about like, a day in the life of you. Yeah, so those are just some preliminary or very quick points.
Nice. So rounding off this conversation by going back to the start of why I did this episode.
Yeah.
The lady, as we talked about.
Yes.
It's a professional gaffe, right?
Yes.
And it happens to us, whether we do it on LinkedIn or whether we do it in person with our bosses, with our colleagues.
Yeah.
How do we recover from something like this? Because it's a professional, I don't know why she'll call it a boo-boo in this case, because it's not something you can put a plaster on.
Yes.
But how do we recover when we mess up professionally?
I feel the only solution is authenticity. That's the only thing that people will buy. So at this stage, it's quite late already, but you never know. It could go viral if you went out and said that, you know what, I've always struggled with this part of my aspect of my personality. So if I were her, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Maybe I would go out and say, you know what, since I was young, I've always struggled with this part of my personality. When I'm backed up against a wall, I tend to double down. And I tend to think I have to kind of like fight my way out of it. And, I've done some self-reflection. Actually, the earliest time I can remember was like, it was this incident. I'm not making any excuses. This is really bad. And I'm seeing a psychotherapist or I'm whatever about this. But I'm learning a lot from this incident. Like what I did was taking full responsibility for this. I recognize now that it's hurtful for Piyush. It was also hurtful for Kumar. And, I hope that, I hope that my apology it goes some way towards, making amends, but I know it probably won't be sufficient. But here's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be off social media for this amount of time. I'm going to be working on this and all that. And I hope that when I do come back again, I hope that all of you somehow find it in your hearts to give me a fresh start from somebody who has felt that this was the only way to survive.
And will people buy it, or does it not matter?
I think it doesn't matter. If you do it like it's really from a place of authenticity, then, it is what it is. You do it because the doing of it is the right thing to do. You don't do it because of how it would land with people. I think at this stage, we need to drop into authenticity. I always feel authenticity is the ultimate cure-all. And when I learned this was when I was in San Francisco. I was giving a keynote, I think, to like 3,000 plus people at a conference. And, at this point in time, I wasn't on stage, but what happened was that was an MC, and she was a mindfulness teacher. She came up to introduce the next panel. And this was during the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movement. San Francisco, tensions were very high. So she flashed up the slide, and behind her, there were it was an all-white panel. There were 3 white guys, and there was like a white lady, right? And she's like, okay, this is our next panel. We're talking about whatever, and then at the back of the room, and there's 3,000 people in the room, there was this angry, murmuring. So she was like, I'm sorry, I can't hear. And then the crowd started chanting, they're all white, they're all white, they're all white. And it became almost like a mob scene where these people were standing up and jeering and oh, look, it's an all white situation, right? And the MC was also white. Okay, now, of course, you might be thinking, well, shit, this is like a nightmare situation. What's she going to do?
Yeah.
If she came out and she had said like, oh, actually, but the next panel has also got like African American or like black person, whatever, then it would just turn into a power struggle. But what she did next was kind of really interesting for me. She took a deep breath and she closed her eyes.
Like in the middle of this thing?
In the middle of this thing, when they were yelling, she took a long, deep breath and then she briefly closed her eyes for like 5 to 10 seconds and she closed her eyes. And she kind of like was breathing. And all of us were like, okay, what's happening? Is she having a nervous breakdown or whatever? And then she opened her eyes again and she said, I want to share with all of you what's real for me. Right now, my heart is beating really, really fast. Right now, my cheeks are red. Right now, I feel an emotion called shame. I don't know how this situation came about. And I can sense the anger and the frustration that is in this room, as well as the pain of Black people who have to yet again educate us on our insensitivity. And I have no good answers for that. It's super important to me that these conversations are had. And, right now, I can't say anything that's going to make that go away, but I can hold space for this, what we are experiencing, and I cannot invalidate the experience. So it kind of was like this. And because of her presence and her authenticity, everyone calmed down, and I feel that she could have done the Janney Hujic thing and kind of like tried to bluff her way out of it. Oh, actually, there was a Black person on the panel, but last minute they pulled out of it. And that's why you're seeing that it's actually not our fault. And I didn't plan the panel and whatever this and that, but that doesn't work. Yeah, what works is authenticity. And that is when, I always think to myself of that moment, like, you can't go wrong if you're doing your best and it's real. If you are doing your best and you are being authentic, nobody can hold that against you to some extent, because what else can we do other than our best? If you're sincere, people will forgive you almost anything. But authenticity creates that connection between you and the audience. And, when the audience feels connected to you, they'll forgive you a lot of things. But not if you kind of go into this kind of fake avatar of like, I need to project a certain whatever, and then people are just BS detectors. They're like, I don't buy that. There's no connection. So for me, it's always connection. And before you connect to others, you have to connect to yourself. You have to know, who am I? What do I stand for? And when you connect to yourself, that makes you vibe your message in a more authentic way.
I felt like that was a teaching moment right there. So I was like, having a lot of thoughts. I'm like, okay, I need to go back and like this whole conversation. Actually, I just needed to like. I think I will like rewatch it. No, I have to rewatch it because I need to edit it. Because I need to edit it. But yeah, I felt like it was a lot of teaching moments in that I can like rejig my LinkedIn game.
When we teach emotional intelligence, we say never react, respond. There's a difference between react and respond. In reaction, it is automatic, instinctively on autopilot, the old patterning coming up. And when we respond, it's actually, we take a breath first. And actually in that pause, we regain our control, our mastery, and our freedom. And then we choose in that pause, what is the wisest thing? How do I tune in to the highest version of myself and then respond to that situation with grace?
All right. On that note, I hope Janney Hujic, who's the lady who was at the center of this saga, I hope she's able to move on.
Yeah, I wish her well too. I mean, it's really not easy these days to be an entrepreneur, and that's why I'm always think like be compassionate, right? Yeah, because everyone stuffs up, and no means and some people like I can see a little bit like there were times in my past where I felt like, with my back against a wall, I just needed to fight out of the situation. And I may have, when I was a kid or when I was younger, told a lie, doubled down on the initial lie, got a bit deeper because I felt like that was the only way of being. So I think that it's something that most of us can relate to, feeling that, we need to double down. Otherwise, it's shame and it's not working.
It's like the end of the line. You need to fix it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. On that note, thank you very much for being here.
you,
Come back anytime.
Natasha.
I feel like we need to do like 2-3 more episodes about work and stuff like that. But thank you very much for being here and chatting about this recent episode. And I will see you again, hopefully, on other topics as well.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's it from The Usual Place today. Now, if you're watching this episode on YouTube, like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell to get fresh content. Now, you can also catch The Usual Place podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the ST app. I'll see you next time at The Usual Place.